Remember the $190 billion that the government just handed out to public schools during the pandemic?
Turns out many schools took that cash and blew it on staff focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, known, as DEI. The Heritage Foundation found that nearly half of school districts with at least 15,000 students have a chief diversity officer, and interestingly, in those districts, minority students suffered greater learning loss than in the districts without that role.
We can't say one caused the other, but there is certainly a correlation that cannot be ignored. Joining us now, former DEI director at De Anza College, Dr. Tabia Lee. Dr. Lee, fantastic to see you. Does this surprise you at all?
No, it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. And in fact, it really is so disappointing. As a lifelong educator, what these chief diversity officers have done in so many schools across the nation with this focus on so-called systemic racism and this encouragement for us to adopt lowered and different standards for minoritized students is really a tragedy. They're undermining and destroying the motivation of our students and our teachers alike. And it's just wrong what's happening. I taught English for many years, and I'm willing to wager if you all took a randomized group of students from any province in China and compared their performance on an English language proficiency exam to students from any American state, you would see the Chinese students outperform American students. And that's because of the pedagogies.
Doctor, it's not just that some students are performing worse with the presence of these chief diversity officers, but there's a longer term effect too, because the reason they're not learning, I would submit, is because they feel like there's something that's giving them a pass. In other words, you shouldn't have to work hard if you belong to a certain group. And to me, that's the really insidious piece of all this potentially. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's absolutely, something that's problematic for so many reasons. And that's why I mentioned that focus on pedagogy. Having a different pedagogy in use for your minoritized students is just toxic. Instead of, our American students learning about shades of meaning, they're learning about shades of skin. Instead of learning about signal words and how it improves your organization of writing, they're learning about virtue signaling to a critical social justice ideology. Instead of learning about pronoun use and grammatical structure of the English language, they're learning about gender identity pronouns in elementary schools. And this is just wrong. It's time for accountability to be had, and parents need to start speaking up to their school boards and calling for an elimination of these chief diversity officer positions. They have no place in schools. They haven't improved the performance of our minoritized students. In fact, they've worsened the performance of all students. And it's time for these corrupted teacher agencies and corrupted teacher unions and, these politicians to put a commitment to student achievement above their commitment to ideological activism.
Dr. Tabia Lee, keep speaking. Please keep coming back here. It was great to see you as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Guess what, corporate America? No one cares about your political views.
A new poll shows 60% of Americans think companies shouldn't take a stance on current events and politics.